In the story of Tokyo Ghoul, there are monsters who play a major role in the terror of humanity. These monsters are called ghouls. They possess predation organs called koganes, designed to help them hunt for food. These ghouls have amped physical abilities, far beyond anything a human should be capable of. But yet, humanity's strongest, juzosuzuya, finds a way to stand among the strongest in the series. In Tokyo Ghoul, some of the strongest characters are also some of the craziest, but this is typically found among ghouls. But Juzo has a lot of experience among that crowd. Formerly known as Rei, he was a child who was kidnapped and taken in by a Rei SS ghoul, Big Madam. This ghoul raised Rei in the ghoul restaurant where he was a human pet. The ghoul wanted him to become a scrapper, a role given to humans in the restaurant. The role of a scrapper is to entertain and quote-unquote prepare food for these ghouls. But Rei was just a child, and in order for him to become a scrapper, he needed training. And that's what these ghouls gave him. They turned it into a show, throwing knives to not only improve Rei's physical capabilities, but to entertain their guest almost like it's a circus act. And eventually, after constant quote-unquote entertainment, Rei became strong enough to be the Big Madam's prized pet. His reward for not only surviving the night but entertaining these ghouls was torture. And after repeated acts of these horrible actions, Juzo's sense of pain became dulled, no longer being able to feel pain of any physical kind. Eventually, Rei became a scrapper and was given a new name. Now known as Juzo, he showed off his agility and skills with the tools used to hunt and train him. But one day, the CCG raided the restaurant, and Rei was taken into custody, where he was complimented for his physical talents, and because of this, he was given the opportunity to become a CCG ghoul investigator, trained under the special investigator Yukinori Shinohara. He was given a new family registry. Rei chose the name Juzo Suzuya, and he began his career as one of the best investigators to ever be a part of the CCG. And due to this ghoul circus-like training, Juzo is insanely talented in knife combat, even being stated by Heise to be a master with knives. Renji even states that no dove is more skilled than Juzo in knife combat, making him even more skilled than Kisho Arima in knife combat. Juzo has shown his skill with knives multiple times throughout the series. His first Quinke was a Bikaku knife known as Scorpion. Bikaku Quinkes are known for their well-balanced stats. They are solid in all areas but lack any excelling attribute, and because of this, its greatest weakness is its lack of finishing power. And because of this, Juzo wanted a better Quinke. Juzo was selected to take part in the 11th Ward operation, but he had no interest in contributing, but instead was looking for a real Quinke. Groups of ghouls stood in his way during his search, but they couldn't stop him. Juzo was looking for a specific ghoul, and he then suddenly stumbles upon him, Aigiri's Raid S Jason. Jason was on the verge of death after being beaten up by Kaneki, even having one of his kakuho eaten by him, but this weakened Jason can still put up a fight, releasing two of his kagane as he tries to take out Juzo. But Juzo isn't someone to take lightly. Even when using a single scorpion knife, he takes out this weakened Jason with no issue. In the end, Juzo walked out of this operation with a new Quinke. Although this Jason was in a weakened state, when only using his kagane, Jason scared off the two Ben brothers. So there's an argument to be made that he still outscales the two while in a weakened state. After some time, his Quinke was ready to be given to Juzo, a Renkaku Quinke with a monetary RC value of 5,000. And for reference, Heise was measured to have a RC value of 2,753. And Renkaku Quinkes are known for their high finishing power, something his Bikaku Scorpion doesn't have. And after its reveal, the Quinke resembles a scythe, a Quinke that is befitting of the CCG's future Reaper. After some time, Juzo takes part in the raid on Kano's lab, where he stumbles upon former academy classmates of his. But these former classmates are no longer human, but now half ghouls. Juzo, in response to this discovery, pulls out his Quinke Jason. Juzo is able to easily dodge both of their Kagane attacks, even clowning on the two during their fight, but eventually Juzo gets cut and his Quinke knocked away. The twin ghouls try to capitalize and attack Juzo, but he blitzes them, stabbing one of them in the eye with a scorpion knife. Juzo, not wanting to give the ghoul the opportunity to heal, follows up on the attack, unveiling that he not only has one scorpion knife, but in fact stole the whole set, all 56 Bikaku scorpion knives. He then lands a barrage of attacks, completely destroying the ghoul, and after leaving her severely injured, decides to save her for last, and instead chooses to go after what she holds most precious. As he says this, her twin sister comes in to attack. Juzo, expecting this, grabs his prize Jason and one-taps the ghoul, and has the opportunity to finish off the other sister, but she retreats in a desperate attempt to save her sister's life. These ghoul twins are actually stronger than you think. Kaneki during the 11th Ward operation completely bullied Yomori, and after their fight, Kaneki goes on to train and cannibalize for 6 months to grow stronger. This Kaneki, after beating Yomori and growing stronger, couldn't even land an attack on the twins. He even goes on to say that their teamwork is a problem and he felt that his life was in danger during their fight. But this Juzo is able to speed blitz them and destroy one of them while only using his Scorpion Quinkeis. And when using his Jason Quinkei, he one-taps the other Ghoul. Juzo is already far superior than any Rate S Ghoul. But this isn't the end of Juzo showing off his Quinkeis during this arc. Later, after Centipede Kaneki defeats Shinohara and is labeled a Rate SS Ghoul, Amon comes into contact with him. He fights Kaneki but is struggling to converse and keep up with him, but Juzo shows up landing a couple of scorpion throws and saving Amon. After insulting the group of investigators for just watching, he joins in on the fight, attacking Kaneki with Jason, but he evades both attacks, where Juzo then reveals Jason's ability, something that was never shown in the anime or ever again in the manga. Juzo's Jason has the ability to release a Kagane and attack its target, and he does this to Kaneki, landing an attack that's so powerful that Centipede Kaneki couldn't heal fast enough. Kaneki is a Renkaku Ghoul. These types of ghouls are known for their insane healing abilities, and a weaker Kaneki was able to heal from Shachi's Kagane attacks. Shachi is a ghoul who is stated to be second to the Owl, but Centipede Kaneki, who has a higher regenerative ability than the Kaneki who fought Shachi, couldn't heal from Juzo's Jason ability, showing how powerful his Quinkei truly is. In the end, Amon and Juzo won the fight. Juzo even tried to kill Kaneki. If it wasn't for Amon's interference, the series would have ended there. Juzo has always been the strongest human. Over and over he shows his superiority to others during the operations, but being the strongest human doesn't really mean much on the grander scale, as humans are severely disadvantaged compared to ghouls. Juzo comes face to face with this fact during the Owl suppression operation. A group of CCG's elite special investigators were assigned to be part of the main force to take down Kuzin, a Rate SS Ghoul known as the non-killing Owl. But don't be mistaken by his name, as during this operation, Kuzin is no longer holding back, taking out countless investigators. And after receiving word that the main force lacked firepower, they sent in Koriyui and juzosuzuya, where he announces his presence, efficiently off-guarding the Ghoul. During this fight, Juzo outperforms every investigator involved, taking on a bloodlusted Kuzin one-on-one, landing multiple attacks on the Ghoul, and here's where the comparisons between Juzo and Arima truly begins. Hoji goes on to comment that the more he watches Juzo fight, the more he reminds him of a younger Arima, except the difference between the two is Juzo lacks the physical strength to take out the Ghoul alone. Shinohara even comments that Juzo isn't very good at working in a team, because he has only been taking ghouls out all on his own. He then says Juzo can't do this alone, but needs to multiply his skills with everyone else involved. But if you choose to use the anime, Mado, who is looked up to for his Quinkei techniques, actually shuts this down and puts the blame on Shinohara, saying the leader needs to know how to work with the others around him. The two then take on Kuzin in a 2v1 and impress the other investigators. But back to the manga, after wearing down Kuzin in a 5v1, Juzo approaches the Ghoul again alone. They clash with one another, but Juzo jumps over the Ghoul and cuts off his arm, dealing the most damage as he severely injures Kuzin's Kakuo. But Kuzin actually took off Juzo's leg, but because of Juzo's dulled senses, he doesn't even feel it. Juzo with one leg then just sits aside and watches the others clean up and finish the Ghoul, but Eito arrives. She viciously harms Shinohara, his mentor, and this is where Juzo begins to feel for others. In a desperate attempt to defend his mentor, he throws some scorpion knives at Eito. Although not doing any damage, they still pierce her Kakuja, and this one-legged Juzo decides to take a stand and fight back. Throwing another barrage, he pierces her Kakuja again, even being able to draw blood. This might not seem all that impressive, but for reference, Kori, an investigator compared to Arima and a part of the Reaper race, using his Quinkei Tarui, his attacks literally bounce off of her. And while using Hoji's Rate SS Quinkei, still couldn't draw blood, but a one-legged Juzo could with just his scorpion knives. After part 1 of tokyoghoul, Juzo has shown to be extremely talented, easily taking the role of humanity's strongest. But the CCG's problem child had 3 glaring weaknesses, holding him back as truly one of the strongest in the series. His first weakness was his missing leg, his second was he couldn't work well in a team, and his final weakness was his lack of physical strength to do damage to full Kakujas. But in RE, the problem child juzosuzuya was looking to change that. In the build up to the auction operation, Juzo was assigned to the role of infiltration. The problem is he wouldn't be able to sneak his Quinkei into the auction, so he would be at a disadvantage. This doesn't bother Juzo, and we come to see why. When faced with these large amounts of ghouls, Juzo decided to show off his fix for his first weakness, unveiling his prosthetic leg, which is able to store his 56 scorpion knives. Juzo goes on a tear, taking out everyone in his path, announcing the beginning of the operation. but he comes across the Rate SS Black Rabbit. They have their altercation. Juzo is able to dodge every Ayato Kagane attack while he is dodging all of Juzo's scorpion throws. They are fighting on equal grounds, but Juzo says during their fight that his chances of winning without Jason are slim. They continue to fight, but it ends in Juzo's retreat. This fight is misunderstood and is used to downscale Juzo when it should actually be the opposite. Juzo wasn't using his strongest Quinke, but instead his Bikaku Scorpions, a limited stock of knives, and he was using these in a fight against an Ukaku Ghoul Ayato. Ukaku Ghouls with their speed and agility naturally have an advantage over Bikaku Quinkes and their lack of finishing power. And on top of that, Ukaku Quinkes are known for their high speed, long range attacks, while Juzo is stuck with an extremely close range weapon. Juzo literally brought a knife to a gunfight. But that isn't the thing that really upscales Juzo though. Ayato is a unique Ukaku Ghoul. He is actually better at close range combat than long range, but yet he still chooses to disadvantage himself and fight Juzo at long range. Even though he naturally has short stamina, he chooses to disadvantage himself and play the war of attrition with Juzo, betting that he can last longer than Juzo's stock of scorpions, because Ayato was scared of Juzo's speed and close range combat skills. This should be quite clear because Juzo is dodging every single Ayato Kagane blast, and even vanishes out of Ayato's sight. You can try and argue he used the smoke to leave, but that's not true. The smoke is blowing to the right while the stairs are facing forward to the stage. The main stage Juzo is actually hiding at. And after Juzo disappears, Ayato even says, "Where is he?" when he was just looking right at him. And instead of claiming Juzo retreated because Ayato was stronger, he himself asked if Juzo ran out of ammo, then says leaving Jason behind backfired on him. Ayato, when he was weaker, he blitzed an investigator that is directly compared to Kosuke Hoji. Hoji was blitzed to be a part of the main force to take down Kuzan. Hoji also bullied a full Kakuja Tatara, and Takizawa even claimed himself that Hoji would never lose to him in a fight with neither holding back. But Ayato, the Rate SS Ghoul who blitzed a Hoji level investigator, the same Ghoul who was even confident in fighting Takizawa, he was too scared to fight Juzo with only a Scorpion Quinke in a close range fight. And Juzo, when speaking after his retreat, says, "I have my promise to Heise," which was to keep Toru safe. The investigator Juzo infiltrated with. Why would Juzo waste time in a fight he already has a disadvantage in because of his available equipment? Later in the auction, Juzo shows he was able to fix his second weakness. The former problem child of the CCG reformed after seeing his mentor injured in the fight against the One-Eyed Owl, and the spectacle of the young brave hero going forth attracted notice and many followers. This is what created the Suzuya squad, and Juzo was able to raise the investigators so much that they were even able to be called an expanded Squad Zero, rivaling Arima's home squad. And after Big Madam destroys Urie and Toru, the Suzuya squad steps in to save them, and they effortlessly track down the Ghoul, showing off their teamwork. Juzo himself, the investigator who once before couldn't handle working in a team, is able to contribute in a team combination attack. And as he stands facing the Ghoul who raised him, he watches as his new family takes out the Rate SS Ghoul, which just leaves one last weakness to fix. The Suzuya squad was assigned to take part in the Rushima operation, and as they make landfall, the Suzuya squad goes on a tear, showcasing their superiority over every other squad, being stated to move too fast for the other teams, such as Kori and Hoji squads. But the Suzuya squad was given clearance to do their thing, and as they proceed, Juzo still is training his men, similar to how Arima trained Take during their fight with Renji and Uta. Misa then retreats from the Suzuya squad, where she then specifies that Juzo is a beast, and the beach was nothing but a one-sided slaughter. Even though she witnessed every investigator fight on that beach, such as Kori, Hoji, even the Q squad, she was impressed by Juzo himself. Later, Juzo's right-hand man Abara comes face to face with a Ghoul Juzo fought before. After being completely bullied by Corona, she begins to insult Juzo and his leadership, when Abara reveals that Juzo would never abandon his men. Juzo attempts to off-guard Corona, but she dodges. He then follows up with some scorpion throws. Corona compliments Juzo's speed and aim and says she can't dodge them, getting tagged by all three. And when having another reunion with a former academy classmate, they choose to have their rematch. She dodges multiple attacks from Juzo, but as she falls, his team jumps in, attacking her as well, revealing that it's not like before when Juzo was alone. Corona then reveals she is stronger than before, playing out her spider half Kakuja form. Juzo then prepares his men for an eradication of a Rate SS Ghoul. Spider Corona attacks the group, but they all defend themselves, and as the fight continues, the Suzuya squad is pressuring her, landing multiple attacks and setting up Juzo for the finish. But he gets caught. Spider Corona with her Kagane breaks through Jason and stabs Juzo. And in the same exact chapter, chapter 81, Arima loses to Kaneki, symbolizing their connection as the Reaper. Now this Corona again is stronger than you think. She is a Rate SS Ghoul, who when not in her spider form was able to overpower and even hold back an attack from a full Kakuja Alaman. the same ghoul who blocked one-eyed Kenkaneki's attack, and Kaneki couldn't puncture Amon's Kakuja, making this Amon stronger than Ato, the one-eyed owl, and Ghoul a weaker Black Reaper Kaneki beat. So Corona, when not even at her full powers, able to contribute in a fight against a Ghoul stronger than Ato, that is also relative to some degree to a one-eyed Kenkaneki. So Juzo getting tagged by Spider Corona doesn't look bad at all. But back to the fight, Corona is gloating over the death of Juzo, but the Suzuya squad doesn't slow down a bit, continuing the pressure against the Ghoul, landing a massive attack. Corona, confused on how they can act like nothing just happened, begins to laugh at the idea that Juzo doesn't matter. But this instead makes the Suzuya squad laugh, because Juzo isn't dead. With one attack, he slices Corona in half. Juzo then reveals his solution to his final weakness, his fix for his lack of physical strength, his tokyoghoulre, Joker armor. Juzo is already known for his speed, but now with his Joker armor he is even faster, completely perception blitzing Corona, landing multiple vicious attacks, and forcing her to retreat. Corona, using only her Kagane, is able to react to attacks from an Alamon, a ghoul that is faster than Ato and is able to react to a one-eyed Kenkaneki's attacks. But when in her faster spider form, she is getting perception blitzed by Joker Juzo. Do you see how crazy Juzo really is when you put it in perspective? Juzo's Joker armor is not your ordinary errata. It actually focuses on Juzo's skilled combat, having knives for hands and blade-like tendrils on the back. And due to his dulled sense of pain, Juzo was able to push his Joker armor farther than most errata users. And similar to how his loss was connected to Arima, his showcase of his full power is also a connection as well. The chapter before, in RE chapter 86, Kenkaneki accepted the role and succeeded Arima as the One-Eyed King. And here, one chapter later, is Juzo with his Joker armor succeeding Arima as the new CCG's Reaper. Juzosuzuya, the CCG's former problem child, is far stronger than you really think. I see people say he would lose to characters like Kuzin and Shachi. That just doesn't make sense to me in the slightest. Juzo is constantly being downplayed even though the story portrays him to be much stronger. Juzo before the Clown Invasion was selected to become the CCG's new Reaper, now known as the Stitched Reaper. Juzo then takes over Arima's former position as S3 squad leader. Dr. Shiba, when speaking of elite investigators who go on to become special investigators, always fight a Kakuja at some point in time, and Juzo was directly mentioned along with Arima and Kori, three investigators who have a place in the Reaper conversation. During the conflict of a war between the Ghoul Group GOAT and the CCG, Shu was asked if they could win. His answer was in an all-out battle. He says they don't stand a chance and directly mentions Juzo as a reason why. He is literally stated to be just like Arima and have abilities that seem out of this world. Believe it or not, but Juzo is relative to Kisho Arima and is beyond the rate Triple S level, and I will prove it. Juzo was assigned to lead his S3 squad into battle on the raid on the GOAT's hideout. Eventually, near the end of the operation, Kenkaneki appears. Both sides understand that this is a critical fight and the outcome will decide the rest of the series, and when faced with a powerful opposition, both sides power up. Kenkaneki pulls out his centipede form, while Juzo pulls out his Joker errata. And in the battle between the successor of the One-Eyed King and the successor of the CCG's Stitched Reaper, Juzosuzuya is the winner. This fight is misunderstood even to this day. There are a lot of excuses that are thrown around to defend Kaneki and downscale Juzo, but none of it holds any weight. Typically, there are 5 things said about this fight, and I'm going to explain how none of them are correct. Pre-fight encounter. Before their fight, Juzo and Kaneki get into an altercation. Kaneki with his Kagane is able to block and dodge all of Juzo's attacks. This is used to try and prove Kaneki is stronger than Juzo, but this doesn't work as a real argument, as we actually see Juzo clash with Kaneki, then dodge his Kagane attack. This portrays relativity with one another, not superiority for one side. And using two characters' base forms for an argument is weird because character A could have a stronger base than character B, but B has a stronger transformation than A. Point 2. Kaneki is holding back while Juzo is going for the kill. This is a common misinterpretation, and the fact is this is actually reversed. People believe Kaneki held back due to his no-kill policy. Originally, the plan was to not kill humans. This was indeed Kaneki's wish, but during the GOAT raid, nobody follows this rule. Hinami and Toka kill countless members of Suzuya's squad, and on top of that, Kaneki in his own imagination says to Juzo, "I won't hold back." So Kaneki was not holding back, while Juzo was. People look to the statement Juzo says right before fighting him that says, "Heize, I gotta tell you, I'm just gonna kill you." This can be easily interpreted as Juzo trying to psych himself up for the fight, because it was Farada's direct order to stop and not kill Kaneki. The Ogai themselves say this. And then on top of that, Juzo, when speaking of the dragon, says, "Maybe I should have killed it," then begins thinking of Heize. Juzo was holding back. Point 3. Juzo thought he was going to die against a weakened Kaneki. This is the worst argument because it's taking this statement completely out of context. Juzo has never seen a one-eyed kenkaneki fight, nor does he know of his condition. He was just comparing himself to the ghoul that killed Arima. This should be clear when after the Couch-Slayer outbreak, Juzo says Heise might be pretty strong. How would he know that if he wasn't there to see the fight? Because he is comparing himself to Arima. Point 4. Kaneki was weakened while Juzo was at his full power. This is another misinterpretation. Yes, Kaneki was in a weakened state, but he still had enough power to draw out his centipede form. It's explained during the Shu arc that if you don't provide fuel for your Kagane, it will stop working. Toka says herself, yes, this is true. She hasn't been eating properly, so she can't pull out her Kagane. That's why Toka bit Kaneki. Although Kaneki was in a weakened state, he still could draw out his strongest form. And on top of that, Kaneki was love amped. Ghouls, when determined to protect something they love, receive an amp in power. Kaneki, right before fighting Juzo, is saying to himself he's glad to be able to protect everyone he cares about. So Kaneki is not as weakened as you think, and is actually amped in power. But Juzo is weakened. Juzo had an extreme mental nerf coming into this fight as he begins to distrust the leader of the CCG, his boss he answers directly to. Juzo then begins to question what he is doing, saying he doesn't want ghouls gone, but only for things to stay the same. Orie even builds upon this mental nerf, saying every investigator has lost sight of why we started fighting in the first place, as they are still upset over being tricked into killing humans during the clown raids, something Juzo did a lot of, and says himself he doesn't like the feeling of as it reminds him of being a scrapper. Juzo only had one reason to keep going on as an investigator, and it was his hope for Shinohara to recover. Nakarai, a member of the Suzuya squad, says, without that, what would he fight for? This is why Juzo even fights Kaneki in the first place, as he doesn't even want to take part in the gold sweep operation, but Furata manipulated him into joining, threatening to cut funding for Shinohara's treatment if Juzo doesn't help. And during the operation, all Juzo is thinking about is Shinohara. Standing in a field of flowers, he thinks back about how he found flowers in Shinohara's hospital room. And after the fight, all he is thinking about is his mentor. And to top all of that off, Juzo didn't want to fight Kaneki. When asked after Kaneki became the one-eyed king if he could beat him in a fight, instead of saying yes or no to a yes or no question, Juzo answers it saying, Heise is my friend, and he does nothing but compliment him, but then says, I will take Shinohara's place. Throughout the story, we actually learn that Juzo taking Shinohara's place isn't what he actually wants. When the ghouls come to the CCG wanting to work together, Juzo in response says, we need to settle this alone. It's what Shinohara would have done. But he's clearly upset, looking down and frowning. He only begins to smile when he's told to make his own decisions, and he chooses to work with the ghouls. Juzo has an extreme mental nerf. He didn't want to fight Kaneki or even be a part of the operation, and in coming into this fight, Juzo is actually injured and fatigued. Abara tells Juzo to not push himself so hard and that he sustained some injuries. People believe that Juzo can't take damage when that is incorrect. Juzo can't feel pain, but it still exists. Abara says this himself. Juzo doesn't feel pain due to his dulled senses, but his body still takes damage. This is why Juzo passed out when fighting Eito in part 1. His dulled senses are not a boost to durability, but a boost to endurance. Now the final point. It was a 2-on-1 fight. This is the most common and understandable claim. Because this fight is off screen, there isn't much to go over. But I believe there's more evidence pointing to the fact that Juzo carried Abara in this fight. The most go-to defense comes from the statement from Furata, where he credits the Suzuya squad for the win and says, one wrong move and Kaneki would have won. People use this to say if it was just Kaneki and Juzo, it wouldn't be close, but that's not the case. Abara's contributions in this fight are extremely overrated. The only thing we know regarding Abara is that he got critically injured. The Council of Kanekis have a conversation regarding Abara, but it disregards everything else said. They say that fighting two Arata users is tough. This does not inherently mean that Abara and Juzo fought on equal terms. It just means that Abara was involved in the fight to some degree. That might sound weird, but I will explain. They then question why they lost the fight. They bring up the idea that it's because of Abara and his good support. My question to this is, how do you scale support? Is Abara stronger than Eito now because of this support? If you believe he is, I want you to explain to me how Takeyomi is Noro level. He provided good support for the Qs, cutting off Noro's Kagane and saving Psycho, but then later is found getting mixed up by Shu. What I'm saying is characters offering support don't scale to the people they are fighting. And what exactly is good support? Because if we use what we saw prior to their fight, Abara doesn't exactly do much when helping Juzo. Before Kaneki arrived, Juzo was taking on Toka and Hinami, with Abara supporting him. Juzo tells Abara to be ready and has him sit on the sidelines waiting until he has an opportunity created by Juzo to jump in and help. And he does this, hurting Toka in the air, forcing her to fall, and Abara uses this opening to attack her, but Toka blocks his attack with her arm, and Abara says not deep enough. She then proceeds to dodge a barrage of his attacks. Obara then sits on the sidelines again watching Juzo fight, where Obara, using Mr. Silver Skull, blocks Hinami's Kagane and creates an opening for Juzo. Is this what it was like during the fight with Kaneki? Is that how he got hit? He sat on the sideline due to not being able to keep up and used Mr. Silver Skull to create an opening for Juzo to finish the fight, but Kaneki broke it, resulting in him getting bodied. Juzo did say how in response to Obara telling him he got hit. Why would Obara need to explain that he got hit if he was actually involved in the fight with Juzo? Why would Juzo ask how if Obara was fighting right next to him the whole time? It doesn't make much sense if Obara was really involved in the fight. Juzo does tell him to be ready again just like he did prior to fighting Toka and Hinami, so it would make sense if the fight was very similar. And Obara being the reason why Kaneki lost is weird when considering the fact that he was actually the last thought the Kaneki Council had in regards to reasons for losing. They blamed Toru for discovering their hideout before ever actually considering Obara. My question for this belief is, if his errata was so effective, where was it during the final fight? He could have helped fight the owl instead of begging Juzo to do it. Or he could have used it to protect the Suzuya squad from Eito's RC blast instead of almost dying and needing to be saved by the Qs. What about when Ghoul Kaiko soloed his whole squad and almost killed them? There just isn't enough evidence to say Obara really contributed much. But instead, most of it points to Juzo carrying the fight. In Kaneki's imagination, even though it was a 2-on-1, Kaneki sees it as a 1-on-1 in this tournament he created. And he even doubts if he could beat Joker Juzo with his Kagane and calls Juzo the undefeated ultimate investigator. Then he questions what he was supposed to do to avoid this defeat, and instead of choosing a different approach to the fight, his first offered solution was to kill Juzo when he was trying to grab candy all the way back in chapter 11 of RE. People use the Obara statement, but before coming to that idea, Kaneki blames saving Hinami from Coach Leia as a reason he lost. And after this Obara statement, Kaneki then questions if he could have even beaten Juzo alone, saying the moment Juzo threw himself at me, it was the decisive blow. This means Juzo did this himself, and walked out of the fight relatively fine. Kaneki even goes on to say that Suzuya stopped me, with no mention of Obara at all. If you want to use the anime, while Obara and the rest of the Suzuya squad were getting bullied by Shu, Nishio, and Renji, Joker Juzo was taking on Kaneki alone, without his Quinke Jason but only his Joker abilities, and they fight on even ground. What really proves how strong Juzo is this statement from Kaneki. Despite him being weakened, he still says the king version of me is the strongest, making him stronger than his previous selves, more importantly stronger than the Black Reaper Kaneki who beat Eito, the ghoul who is at the pinnacle of the rate triple S level. Juzo outscales her. Juzo is relative to a one-eyed King Kaneki. The Ferrata statement proves this, and after this fight, Juzo continues to show insane feats despite being in his weakest physical state. Right after his fight with Kaneki, the dragon is born. Juzo, while fighting gravity and with one hand holding Jason, is able to fight off the dragon. The dragon is the strongest creature in the series, said to have been able to kill Eito and Arima in a single punch, and is described to be the final boss. Juzo during the final fight is still wearing bandages as he is still weakened from the fight with Kaneki. But despite being weakened, a base Juzo one-shots Eito's Kakuja head, and if she wasn't a walking corpse who was immune to damage, the fight would have been over. Even the ghouls were surprised she can still fight. Base Juzo then is able to block her large-scale Kagane attack. He then activates his Joker armor to shield Kori from her RC blast, and the armor is able to endure it. And after this, Joker Juzo then fights a Ghoul Kaiko. Kaiko claims to be stronger than Arima and said he trained him, and he was wielding the highest rated Quinke in the series, the rate triple S Owl Quinke that Arima used against Kaneki. And with one swing, Kori thought Kaiko was actually Eito. And for context, this Kaiko went on to solo the Suzuya squad, the Q squad plus Yusa Arima, and Renji, Shu, and Nishio in a 3v1. But Joker Juzo, who was still injured and fatigued, was the only one to put Kaiko on the defensive. And the only reason he lost was because of his Joker armor being too damaged from Eito's RC blast. Juzo's movements were so fast and too much for the armor, it broke apart on him. Juzo Suzuya, the Stitched Reaper, is a lot stronger than you think, easily being the strongest human, but is able to stand among some of the strongest characters in the series, easily beyond rate triple S level.